Okay, I'm gonna try it again. This is my second time trying to extract something useful from this role-playing game event that I went to yesterday. It was for game masters and players, and it was led by game producers and writers. So shout out to my man Chris. He's a writer. He wrote in a role-playing game companion book that explains it. It explains how the game is played. But I never played role-playing games yet. All my favorite brands, Star Wars, Star Trek, Halo, they all have role-playing games. Serenity with Firefly, they all have role-playing games. And what role-playing games do for people is it allows people to experience the stories firsthand. It's almost like a video game that's in free reign, like, what is it? Grand Theft Auto has a game where you can just drive around and do whatever you want. This is a little bit more, role-playing games are a little bit more creative, or there's another element, whereas you have a game master that outlines the game, and the people who are playing the game follow the game master's outline. And there are characters that fit in the universe, and sometimes they allow people to bring in characters from somewhere else. So you may have a Star Wars story, but hey, you want to bring in Black Panther, or you want to bring Mace Windu into a Star Trek world. That's just all their imagination, and that's actually cool for them to, for games to allow that. Now, how it impacts a writer, or things that writers can get from role-playing games, is the subject of this blog. Basically, because for people to want to choose to use your character, a character that you created in a role-playing, that you created from a book or a comic or for a film, and use it in a role-playing game, you have to have it really has to be a lovable character, a strong character, a well-created character, and those characters are, creating those characters require a certain level of elements. Now, for somebody to jump in and want to role play in your story, your world that you create separate from the story, because they create their own stories in your world has to be strong, or just have some really cool elements to it. So this blog, I'm focusing on the elements that you can use, that you need in your character development and in your world building, that can make people love it so much they want to say, hey, let's take all these characters and go to that world, or let's take that character from your book, from your comic book, and put them in this world. And that's really cool. However, now, to do that, your character, you have to really round out the creation of your character. People just can't play with characters that aren't finished. Now, mind you, in a story, you don't have to always finish your character for your character to be good, or for your story or your book to be good. But if people are going to play with your character, you need to finish flushing it out. So there are some elements that I learned yesterday in my role-playing game workshop that really would help me as a writer, and I think that it will help you as a creator of your video game, your comic books. Heck, even if you write role-playing games, you probably know a lot of this already. But for your novels, your movies, whatever it is you're writing. And, they talked about your purpose, your character's purpose to the story. That is, for a role-playing game, how does it relate? And that's really important. So purpose is one. Then there is your origin. Where did the character come from? People really need to know that. And sometimes, in our effort to be mysterious, we don't always think about that. We just say this is who this is, but their origin, their backstory. Why is that important? Well, in a role-playing game, sometimes a character's origin, how they got their powers or their tools or their motivation become useful in their story manipulation. Now, mind you, role-playing games, the game master comes up with their own story. So all the characters have individual backgrounds and origin stories, but they're being used for this other story's purpose. So if you have a Mace Windu, it'd be important for us all to know who this character is, so that way their origin story may dictate how they are useful in this story, how they affect and impact this story, or how they relate to other characters that are in the story. So like, we were in a space story, and we all went around and dropped in characters. One person dropped in Indiana Jones, another person dropped in Sherlock Holmes, another person dropped in 007, right? James Bond. Another person dropped in, I dropped in Mace Windu. Another one dropped in Lara Croft. And so all of those characters have been created so that way we can see how they can work in a story and they can help you in an adventure. So if you're going on a quest, who would you bring with you? So now there are 3 elements that you need to have in a quest, all right, to kind of round out your team. And this is beautiful for like a story. Some of us don't think we, don't know how to always assemble our teams, So something you'll always need is a fighter, right? You'll need some type of fighter, whoever it is. They got to be that front person that can fight and defend, protect. Boom, your Captain America, your Bruce Lee, whoever it is, right? Then you need a strategist, right? Definitely need somebody who calculates, who can think, who can plan, who's your your Nick Fury, right? Your team leader. And a whole lot of people can fill that role, but you need dedicated people for that role. And then you also need a medic, healer, somebody that can help when injuries take place. So those are some of the elements, and these are the things that they said. I haven't really put my creativity around it, so I can't really say, but to me, it really made sense, and I don't even know if I'm making sense right now. But I would urge you to look into role-playing games, look into the characters that they have for that. Now, the other element is your world. Your world needs to be diverse. It needs to have a variety of elements. I remember when I first wrote my Thug Angel, I thought of like a video game of levels, like Mortal Kombat. You fight this person, then this other person comes harder. And it's almost like Game of Death with Bruce Lee, where he was going up the different buildings. And that's one way. But then in a role-playing game, you need an expansive world. Think of Lord of the Rings. In my Harlem Shake world, I have a beautiful map that I laid out of the new configured Earth. And there's zombies here, there's giants here, there's an underworld here, and then there's animals here, there's different type of animals there. And so in that type of world, you have a beautiful map, and role players can take their adventures to different parts of the map. And then also think like Lord of the Rings. There's elements that they can find in different parts of the map. And for a person who is writing a fantasy, writing an adventure story, those are things that you need to think of and keep track of. And you can sell the map along with your book. if you create a really cool map and you got a story that uses all of those different elements of it, and then people can, walk through your map. And all of that is writing. Whether it is like me, I did my story, Welcome to Boss Lady's Planet. I had to think of all of the different planets in that system. As I went through, I started to create the different climates, the different characteristics of each one of those planets. So that becomes useful in a role-playing game, because my story takes you through 4 or 5 of the planets. They want to know about all 12 of the planets. They want to know about the climates. They want to know about the people on each one of those. So now I have more stories that I can tell, or they're going to come up with a story in my world. All of that is important. And for like writers, we don't always think of stuff that's not necessary to the story. Now, in your story, you only need to tell people what's necessary. But in role-playing games, they want to know everything, because they're going to create their own story to go along in your world. And they want to take your characters to their worlds. So I don't know. I found it really useful. I hope you find this one useful. I don't know if I'm going to come up with my own role-playing game. That's a lot. I don't know. I have never played a role-playing game. I'm sorry. I think it's my shirt that just messed up the view on this blog. But so I've never played a role-playing game. I think they're interesting way to experience entertainment. I think they're an interesting way to experience escapism. You get to be Luke. And in the video game, Star Wars Battlefront, yeah, you're Luke, or not even Luke. You get to customize your own Jedi. And I don't even think video games have really caught up to role-playing games. That's why people are still playing role-playing games on the level. They haven't figured out how to do that, to, take your character from Star Wars that you've customized and take them to another planetary system and another ship that you've customized, or a fantasy world. That's crazy. So you could do all of that with role-playing games. But anyway, I don't know what you'll get from this, but this was what writers can get from role-playing games. Learn more. You may have something that you can get from it. I don't know. This is just kind of a little stuff that I got from it, and it was really heavy on the character and the world building. All right, peace. Talk to you later.